I'm gonna tell you why the decentering man movement has become toxic, and not from a pygmy standpoint. Stay tuned as I explain why. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Sonia. I'm a nutrition coach. I help women over the age of 40 lose body fat, and I also talk about controversial subjects on this channel. The number one reason I feel it's toxic is due to the fact is they have a extreme and negative connotation when it comes down to talking about men. They always highlight things that men have done to women, which can include domestic violence, narcissistic abuse. Everything negative that men have done to women has been highlighted in the content. Now, I would not debate or refute those facts because those are real things that have happened to women, and a lot of women have been traumatized due to those things that men have put them through. My point of view is, if you're going to tell women that men are bad, you should also give a positive perspective. And what I mean is, there are women that still want to have relationships. Me personally, I choose to be single for a while, but that may not be for every woman, and there's women that do want to date men. We need to teach women how to have a healthy relationship and what signs we should look for. You need to look for a man that's very self-aware, that's emotionally regulated, that's reliable. We need to give them tools to evaluate their potential partner so they would not end up in the same situation like they did last time. There's nothing in their content that talks about that. It's just always what men are doing. And I understand that that brings in views because it's very controversial. So in order to draw an audience, they have to highlight the negative things. And who am I to judge how someone approaches your content? But for me, it comes off as toxic because it's not giving you a healthy balance. Number two, they talk about men are their focal point of their content. 90% of the stuff that they talk about is about men, is never about centering yourself. So the whole point of the decentering man movement is to put yourself on the focal point and not men. They never focus on how women can better themselves and how they can center themselves. They never talk about how women can improve their relationships, not with just men, with relationships with their family, friends. They never teach skills about self-mastery, how to level up your bag. It's always about what men are doing. And to me, if a man's living rent free in your mind, that means you still want men, and that men are causing you, well, not causing you, men are your focal point of your basically life. They're the center of your life if you cannot take them off the pedestal and put yourself by focusing on yourself. I noticed that the women that are decentered and that are single, they never talk about men as their main source of content. They talk about different controversial issues. They talk about hobbies, what they're doing. They talk about different things. And you could tell that they're decentered because they're not really focused on relationships. They're just focusing on what's gonna better them in their life, which I love. I love when women are positive and they talk about hobbies and not necessary, or they show you content of when they're in Pilates or when they're in the gym. So they tell you things what they're focusing on and not necessarily men. And I notice with some of these content creators, they're so extreme that this is all they talk about 24/7. That leads me to my next point. The main reason why, my last point I should say, the main reason why these women are talking about men is because, for one, it's trendy over the last couple of years. Number two, well, it's trendy, and they also want to grift. They're trying to get a bag off of women that are vulnerable. So they're playing on the women's trauma and vulnerabilities to try to get a bag. So that's the reason why they come out with, or they create a trauma bonding situation with their followers so that they can keep donating money, keep them in the same cycle of trauma thinking versus trying to elevate their way of thinking to do better in life. And most of the people that are online, they don't live their lives. They're telling you, oh, you shouldn't date, but they're out here dating, doing whatever they want to, which is their business. I'm not saying no one should date if they're decentering men. What I will say is, if you're telling women not to date men, that they should become lesbians, that they need to do this, Some of these women are not listening to their advice, and they're doing the exact opposite. So they're telling you, oh, they're not a pick-me, but they're the biggest pick-me behind closed doors. So you have to take their words with a grain of salt and do what's best for you. And when it comes down to most movements that are trending on social media, there's always going to be, even though it starts off positive and is meant for the right reason, it's always going to be something that's going to be extreme. It always goes to the left in most movements. Just like with the body positivity, when they was including all different types of body types, and I liked the movement, but then it went to extreme where it got toxic. So with all movements, keep in mind you always have to have your discernment and whatnot. You have to be discerning when it comes down to what you consume. Not everything is for consumption. You can take what's useful for you in your life and then move on with the rest. Do not stay with listening to these content because they will shape the way your mind is, and that you will not evolve. You'll stay stagnant. Now please leave me a comment. Tell me if there's any content creators that you're following right now in the decentering movement. Do you think it's negative or positive? I would love to hear your thoughts. Until next time, please like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.